Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. The time is 7:02. All rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the primary aspect for tonight's agenda, and for consideration of that agenda, are two main things. One is a new business item, which is a public hearing for the special use permit regarding the Torchport Air Park. And then the second item is an additional topic around zoning ordinance amendments and kind of updates on where we are there and steps going forward. So as far as the agenda this evening, are there any planning commissioner comments or concerns about the agenda this evening?
No.
So may I have a motion to approve today's agenda as drafted? Oh, Barbara?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is approved. So moving on to conflict of interest. Are any planning commission members feel that they have a conflict of interest regarding this evening's activities? Laura, you do, and why?
Because I live next door.
That is a good reason. I knew that was the reason, but I thought I'd hear it from you. So anyone else? Okay, so Laura, for that portion of the meeting, you will have to be excused.
Will you come get me?
Yes.
Thanks.
You can stay
Okay.
until we get to the actual section. Okay, moving on then, approval of the meeting minutes from April 18th in 2023. Any comments about or any suggested edits of those minutes? I would just make a general comment about the meeting itself. I felt like there was a lot of good dialogue. That was a very kind of a heavy topic, even though it's relatively simple in nature, but it's complex in the impacts to the community. But I really appreciate all of your efforts on that. And I thought we landed in a good place approving that moving forward.
And the minutes in your hard copy packet are on 34 and 35. I accidentally put them in the wrong order.
I was really excited when it wasn't the 5-pager.
Yeah.
So any comments or edits regarding the minutes?
Oh, I did have one. I was just questioning the page 35. You'll look at scheduling 2 Monday night special meetings in April/May. Did we really propose that, April and May?
It was
April?
May and June.
Okay,
Yeah,
that was the only thing I caught.
so we should make that adjustment. I think we'd already given up on April, but well, maybe we might have talked about it, but I think it was definitely May and more into June. So Jackie will make that edit. Any other changes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes subject to that adjustment in the dates regarding the proposal for future special meetings being May and June as opposed to April, May?
So moved.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the meeting's minutes are approved. Now we'd like to open it up for public comment on agenda items other than the public hearing topic. So this would be in particular to the ordinance. Is that correct, Sarah? So the ordinance revisions and so forth. So if anybody would like to make comments about any topic or agenda items that are not part of the public hearings, we're going to get into that in just a moment. Doesn't look like we have any comments. Sarah, do we have any correspondence?
There is a letter that we put on your desk that was received. It's related, I guess, to the public hearing, but it didn't come through the proper channels. We require that they be submitted through zoning admin at torchlaketownship.com. And this one came through today through through, it looks like personal emails actually, and not even through township emails, so.
So the correspondence, so the subject of it is basically whether or not it's a concern raised that the Torchport Condo Association bylaws govern the runways, at least since the air park was sold at the amendment required. So how does that interplay with the township?
Well, private bylaws and deed restrictions are not enforced by the township. That's up to the association in general for all bylaws and master deed requirements.
So we don't, saying it differently, that we don't have jurisdiction over that.
Correct.
Yeah, so
We have no
that's a
enforcement
separate matter of
mechanism.
enforcement or
It's a private,
ground rules around what happens or doesn't happen
correct.
associated with that. Did everybody see that correspondence? Any questions around it?
And so I would just encourage anybody, I probably should have, I didn't realize it printed all, should have probably crossed out all the email addresses since they're personal, they're not Torch Lake email addresses. So, please be sure to use Township Torch Lake.
Went to my spam.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
no, it didn't. Not spelled right.
Okay. That's why you didn't receive it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have, on the website and in the notice, it talks about going to zoningadmin@torchlaketownship.com.
Yeah, that certainly appreciate that. I don't like to receive things in my personal email. However, there is a question raised, and so I'm glad we brought it forward this evening. Okay, any other issues or any other correspondence?
No other correspondence.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business from last time?
No, we do not.
Although we do have to come back and plan some special
Right.
meetings, so I suppose if we counted that, but we'll get to that when we get to that section. Okay, any other questions before we move into the major topics tonight? Okay, with that, we'll now open it up for the public hearing for special use permit 2023-01, the Torchport Air Park request for a temporary outdoor event, May 26th through the May 29th of this year at 1391 North US 31, and the parcel numbers associated with. So with that point, Mr. Bays, or if you would like to step forward, and if you would like to make any comments, now would be a great time.
This on?
Yeah, you have to talk really close or hold on to it.
Okay, if you guys can hear me. Yeah, so again, this is our third annual charity fly-in. If anybody was here last year, we had a great turnout again last year. We put a pancake breakfast on. Again, that was kind of rekindling the flames from the old pancake breakfast that had been going on out there for a long time. We raised just over $26,000 over the weekend for 5 local charities, 4 food banks, and then East Jordan, the Depot, the Teen Center in East Jordan. $5,700 and some dollars went to each one of those 5. So again, it was a great event. Fireworks show was amazing again. I think it's all about bringing the community together and kicking off summer up here in northern Michigan. There's a lot of flying activity. I myself was super surprised this year when we pulled the pancake breakfast together and we had 25 general aviation airplanes coming as well. That was amazing. I think it's the most activity the airport's seen in a lot of years. So again, I don't know that I have anything else to add. It's just been a great event so far, and I think we want to just continue that tradition.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah.
One is, what do you have planned differently this year from last year? Just
So
kind
the
of a
only
summary.
thing that was added this year was the cornhole, the charity cornhole tournament, and we're just going to put that right out on the runway, and we're going to have 2 different. What would you call it? Two different tournaments. A draw tournament and then partnership tournament. So 2 different ones throughout the day. Other than that, it's all charity based and it's all going to good cause.
And you had a car show, was it last year or the year
We
before?
didn't. We were kind of preparing for that because that's what they did prior to us getting involved. They did the kind of a car show fly-in type of deal. So we were just trying to mold in everything that had happened in the past, and we didn't have enough time to do that, and nor do I have the resources to kind of pull that together. But the cornhole, a lot of people like playing cornhole up here, And that seemed like that would be a next best fit to bring in some money.
Okay, thank you. Any commission members, any questions for Mr. Bays?
Can I just ask one?
Absolutely.
That cornhole, what is the date and time on it?
Let me do one of these just so you have it. I think it's 2 different times on Saturday.
Thank you. Yeah, 10 a.m. on May 27th. Oh, and then the 2 p.m. on the 27th as well. Okay.
So most of the main activities are all on Saturday. The only thing I would like to add is I have since got the camping permit from the health department.
Any other questions?
So for the camping, is that specifically for the individuals flying in, or does that encompass everything?
It's aviation.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bays. So I guess, Sarah, I guess if you could summarize for the commission your application or the filling out, not
Sure.
Mr. Bays' application, but your findings about the application?
Sure. So this is a very similar application that we had last year. And so I did include a copy of the minutes from last year's approval, just so that you could see what was talked about and any conditions that you put on it. Those are the ones that are at the beginning of the packet in the wrong location. That looked like they should have been last month's meeting minutes. So in addition to that, the public hearing was published April 20th in the Elk Rapids News, and the 300-foot mailings were deposited at the post office on April 21st. So that would meet the noticing requirements for this application. So you guys already kind of talked about the activities that are happening there. So we've got the pancake breakfast, the airplane displays, the camping for the pilots, the fireworks, adding the cornhole tournament, no car show that was in last year's application. You know, a lot of the site plans, the same site plan that you saw last year. So I didn't really update that throughout the report because it was, you know, the same site plan. We did send out the site plan and the information to outside agencies. That's required by the zoning ordinance. So I believe that email was in the packet that showed the agencies we sent it to. We've heard back from EMS, fire, and the health department so far. Bill did ask me about MDOT today, and so I reached out to them, but I haven't heard back from MDOT as far as if there's any permitting required. One of the conditions is that any outside agency permits are required, so we can make sure that if MDOT is requiring a permit or has any comments, that would be something they'd be required to get before they can have the event.
Do you have any insights into how they might view that?
You know, there's a commercial driveway there, so it wouldn't have to do with driveway. It would have to do with traffic management potentially related to the fireworks, which typically, my understanding would fall towards the sheriff's department, maybe the fire department for access to that. So I don't think that MDOT's going to get involved in it just from my experience working with them in the past, but I'm always, you know, happy to reach out to make sure that we don't miss anything.
I went to the pancake breakfast last year and a couple of the other events during the day. I was not at the fireworks. So were there any issues with traffic last year? If any of you were there, that you were at the fireworks when the traffic is heaviest?
I wasn't there. I haven't heard of any complaints or no discussion about it.
Okay.
And then the only other additional thing I'd want to mention is that on page 11 of 13 of the report, it's page 19 of 36 of the packet, there's some special use standards that are in here. So once we get through this process, the public hearing with, you know, public comment and public input, the planning commission will need to look at each of these standards and make a finding related to each of those. So it's the same process you went through last year, but just because we don't deal in special uses frequently, that is something that I'll direct you back to eventually to make sure that you go through here and make a determination on those.
So based on what was done last year and what is coming for us this year,
Right.
that's what we're going to talk about.
Well, you're going to look at, I mean, this is a new application that stands on its own, But there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that's changed from last year, and it is a very similar application, although it doesn't have the car show. That's being removed in the cornholes being added. But yeah, the site plan, like I mentioned, it's the same as last year's site plan. And then, yeah, if you were at the pancake breakfast, if there's anything that you saw out there that you thought might need to be changed or revised for, this year, and I don't know if we'll get some public input that maybe there were some concerns or issues, that we need to update. But from the first year to the second year, we didn't, have kind of the complaints from that needed to be addressed. And so we'll see what happens this time around.
Okay, any questions for Sarah? Barbara?
I thought there was some inconsistency in here from the fire department. They originally said they didn't have the availability to bring staff or fire trucks to the event.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that was cleared up or not, or is that,
That was the same as last year's because they have another event that they're at. I think last year, you were looking even for them to be present at the pancake breakfast or to, have the trucks, and they said, we can't be there because we're somewhere else. So I think that's a similar statement here, other than with the fireworks, if there's, a red flag warning or something where the fire chief would be able to say, you can't do it. Was his comments. But, yeah, I think his comments were just, well, let me pull them up here. So this talks about they will have personnel standby for the event, and then the concerns were parking on one side of Bay Colony. So it's not restricted, and if there's a red flag day, no burning. So I'm guessing last year was there parking on Bay Colony? Is that what happened? There wasn't any parking on the road?
park there, but we didn't have parking aside from that. There was enough
Right.
in the airport.
Right, and so that is, and that's outside of the airport. I guess that's the road next to it. So that would be something maybe if the planning commission wants to talk about, but also if they're legally parked.
It's the sheriff's department issue, isn't it? How
Yeah.
control where they come and park on the
So-
public road?
But it is
They don't
related
park
to
there,
the,
I
it's
guess.
related to the event though, so you could say that they need to park inside and have traffic
I
monitors.
did not see the fireworks last year, but the year prior to, I did. And along Bay Colony, there were a few people that pulled over. A lot of people were kind of turning around and heading back out, trying to figure out where to go. And then there's a couple of houses, Laura's being one, and there were some people there. I think there's another house a little bit east. I don't know if there's anybody there or not, but there wasn't a material issue that I saw or concern.
I didn't see one either. Who knows, if the houses came out on launch years, why?
So if there's no more questions for Sarah.
I had
sorry,
one
Bill.
question about the meeting notice, and not really for this event for this year, but the 300-foot mailing radius. I sent you an email, but I just sent it today. The impacts of some of the activities of the event go far beyond 300 feet. And I don't know what not sure what criteria it follows for just this particular application, but I think there's greater interest and concern around the community beyond 300 feet because of the impacts that extend, in the air throughout the community.
So
So can we have a broader mailing for any event or this event next year where the impacts go off-site?
Yeah, and I think that would be a good discussion for the planning commission to talk about, looking at the zoning ordinance. So the 300 feet comes from state law for special use applications require the noticing to be 300 feet. And so that's what our zoning ordinance follows. So the planning commission, if you'd like it to go further, should have a discussion about if in general you want to require greater radius for any noticing, that would be greater than state law, or potentially certain uses, for instance, outdoor events or maybe some other uses that we have special use permits for in the zoning ordinance, if you want to say specific to those that we'd like to have a greater radius for that. So I think that's something the planning commission, when you're working through, the zoning ordinance, and we're talking about that in the next coming months, definitely should come up as a part of that conversation.
Great, thank you.
So if no more questions from the commission, then we'll move into the,
I've actually got one more.
Oh, sure.
Do we have a copy of the camping permit? It's not in my packet.
No, we didn't have it at the time of the packet. I don't know if you have a copy with you or if that's something you could send over from the health department.
but any decision would be subject to that being provided, correct?
Correct. I mean, I would make the recommendation that that's a condition.
Right,
So-
well, yeah, because I saw that in your recommendation at the
Right.
back, and that made sense to me.
Mhm.
So, Casey will not give this actual final stamp one until she shows up on the 25th and walks it.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Kevin, any you set? Okay, so with that, we'll open up the public hearing for public comment. Any members of the public would like to come forward and make comments regarding this particular special use permit, please fill out a public comment card and keep your comments to about 2 minutes if possible. Any questions or comments from the community? Mr. Serdarian.
Bill Stradire, 5903, North M88 Eastport. I have a question for Sarah. As I read the application, Sarah, when I read the application, I wasn't clear. Is Mr. Bays applying for permits to camp, RVs, et cetera? Is that the idea?
This is a time for public input to the board.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I'd like each of the planning commission to look under 2.19 of the zoning ordinance. According to that zoning ordinance, the applicant has to own the RV and the property. And if the case is we're having guests on Mr. Bays' property and he doesn't own the RV, then I think it's a clear violation of our ordinance, and I'd like you to consider that when you look at this piece of property. Not so much against Mr. Bays' activity, but that would set a precedence for the rest of the community that the planning commission worked long and hard to get that ordinance approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Ma'am, please step forward.
This is my first meeting, so I'm not sure the protocol.
Oh, if you could just state your name and address into the mic.
2757 Bay Harbor.
You're going to have to go a
Ma'am,
little bit
could you
closer.
come a little closer to the mic, just so the folks that are trying to video in can hear you?
I'm not sure that it's on.
2757 Bay Harbor Club Lane.
We're going to try to adjust it for you.
Didn't want to break the microphone. There you go. All right. Rita Furdak, 2757 Bay Harbor Club Lane. Can you hear me now?
We can. You
And
don't have to restate that, but if you
And my question is with reference to insurance and the liability that all of us, and particularly all of you who give permission in the event of a serious firework accident, and most of you are not in my age group that remembers the very serious accident in Charlevoix with fireworks on the public space. And for a long time, there was a lot of issues with insurance. So my question is, who's responsible, who's liable in the event of an accident, particularly children?
Thank you. Any other members of the public would like to come forward? There are no furthers. So with that, we will close the public hearing for public comment. And now we'll move into deliberation amongst the Planning Commission. So I guess, Sarah, the first thing I would like to reflect on is one comment we heard was regarding section 2.19, the zoning. So my understanding of how this fit into the zoning ordinance was because this is a special use permit for that particular parcel, and that as it's currently zoned with a permit for it, if with an application for a special use, the planning commission thereby would decide whether or not to approve.
Right, it's part of the outdoor event on the commercial property. So on commercial property, that's a special use application for that outdoor event. So that's the difference between 2.19 talks about, residential property and permitting for each unit. So the first year that the event happened, that is what happened. They received permits to camp on individual parcels that are within the subdivision there. But then the ordinance was changed, and so last year, that's when everything got pushed to the commercial property to fall under the outdoor event section of the ordinance.
And so what kinds of, well, part of the thing is you talked about earlier, the decision-making process for the commission is to use those standards forward and to walk through, and that would be one component of it.
Correct.
But the ordinance itself forces the matter into a special use application and then a review by the commission to
Correct.
decide whether or not to allow it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, it looked like you had a question, or am I just imagining things?
No, I was just.
Can you turn your mic
waiting
on?
for The next question.
So no, any commission members have questions, I didn't mean to commandeer the thing there.
Can I just address the fireworks insurance question?
Sure.
So the fireworks are not subject to this outdoor event application because that's something that someone can do. These are not commercial grade fireworks. They're not approved by the township. Anyone at any time can set off these. They're consumer grade. You go to the store and you buy them. At this time, it's legal under state law to have these fireworks displayed. The township can't regulate that because it falls under the state law that allows it.
The question was more about who's liability. So the township can't regulate it, but is township at all liable for any action by approval of the permit? I think that's what the question was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an attorney. I don't know how that all works. But, it's mentioned as being a part of the activities that are happening there, but by approving the outdoor event, we can't issue permits for the fireworks because it falls under, the state tells us we can't.
Any other
I
questions?
had a question about the hours of some of the activities. Some are listed and some aren't. And my comment about the notice is related to it. In past years, most of the community's comments and concerns were about the paramotor activity and the noise associated with it. And I think with a 300-foot radius notice, a lot of folks aren't aware that we're making this decision tonight. There are times listed for many of the events, but not that event. And I think that the application should include a limitation of the time for the paramotoring activity because of the nature of the impacts that go well beyond the site and the annoyance that it is to the community. To try and limit the annoyance, we limit the time frame and approve the application with limitation to that time.
So time frame for the overall event or time frame for the paramotors?
Time frame for the paramotors, there's an air show that's listed from 8:30 to 10 p.m. I think that's 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's times listed for the pancake breakfast, for other things, but not for general paramotoring activity, which is where the biggest impacts from the event that's on the site occur, well off the site.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a
Absolutely.
to Bill, with all due respect, growing up with paramotors and sailors and whatever we have that fly around, I understand they like good clean air in the mornings and in the evenings. And I don't have an issue of them flying in the morning or the evening. It's kind of nice. It's a short term. They don't do it all the time. So to set their hours when they can fly, when they can't, it's more nature related to what the weather's going to be, in my opinion. Unprofessional as it may seem. And when we start talking about a 300-foot or, sending out notices, I agree with you. I mean, it has a farther impact than that, but we could go into a lot of distance by doing that, where we can fly over, and I think probably the 300-foot is good without spending additional money to tell somebody that this is going to be. I think the media gets it. It gets out there to get them recognized, but I think the responsibility is on Mr. Bays to do what he's done. I've watched it now for 3 years from outside. Now I'm here, and it's a short-term period that I think is really nice that he's able to bring the community together as they have. I know I like things quiet. My dogs like things quiet, but I also like the idea to know that there are things going on around us that help stimulate the economy and the growth, and just my opinion.
I would just want to comment on the notice piece. I hear both perspectives. I do think it would be, I think it's something that, I like Bill's suggestion about, bringing it up in that, and then I guess it was Sarah that said that we should review that as we think about the ordinances. Just consideration, because it is, it does, certainly with my time being involved with this commission and even leading up to that, the paramotor thing has been one of the hotter topics around the noise associated with them. And so, I'm not sure the implications of going from 300 to 500 feet or what that would be. It'd be interesting to look at a map and draw a radius around it and see what that touches, because 300 feet gets used up pretty quickly. So, and I'm sensitive on both sides personally as well. I live on the bay, as some of you I know live on the water as well. And so the paramotors come down in front, and it's, there's bald eagles right in the trees above our property, and you can tell it kind of disturbs them a little bit. But on the flip side, there's really super loud boats and jet skis out there too. And the paramotors are probably a little bit more proximity to the eagle, but they're all, can be kind of perturb the environment. And that's just like chainsaws do too. We're doing construction. It bugs the eagles all day long. So I get the concerns, but I also, it is relatively short time. So those are my comments on it. Other questions or thoughts from the commission? Denise or Barbara, anything?
Since you asked. I personally like my peace and quiet, but I do feel that looking at the greater good, this is a one-time activity. I commend the camaraderie and the bringing together and the fundraising. And I have somebody that regularly leaf blows for hours at a time, and it's very annoying, but I think this is temporary. I think it's a great event. Like he said, it kicks off the summer. So I'm not opposed to this because of the noise, but I do understand your sensitivity to it.
Yeah, so what I'm proposing is to limit it, like from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Like, that's still morning. It's not to eliminate it. It's to limit it so that the annoyance is contained.
By law, I think the paramotors can fly, legally they cannot fly before sunrise or after sunset. So what is the time of sunrise? No, it's got to be like 7:50. I'm going to look it up.
Just know it's pretty calm early in the morning, and it's nice to fly, right? Sometimes that might be the only time. Right. You can fly all weekend. That's kind of what happened last weekend. It was one day, one morning, the rest of the time, nothing And it's safe.
Earlier than I thought.
We're not having a discussion with the group right now. Really, this is us having a consideration.
Excuse me, yeah, so sunrise is 6:20 and sunset is 8:56, so it's later than I thought. So what is so the one aspect is the limiting the time period. What does the other commission members feel about that? I think Kevin, I think we know your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think 7 to 8. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'd rather deal with other battles than a parasailer right now. When it comes to.
Use your microphone, please.
When it comes
The noise, I've got other issues to deal with, and a parasailer's not gonna deal with it right now. I like what happens. I like the serenity of it. I know I hear chainsaws, but I also know that morning time could be the best time to fly.
Barbara, Denise? Fine with the way it is? Okay. So yeah, I tend to, I mean, I would prefer it to be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but I'm also sensitive to the aspects of it. And we could have a bad weather that weekend. There may not be any of them flying. So, and I'm partial because I'm right there with you, so I know where it's coming from. So, any other questions or concerns from the commission?
Yeah. I'm concerned about the liability. If somebody's injured, if something crashes, two run into each other, one runs into a plane, whatever. I would assume that the pilots have some sort of vehicle insurance. It's kind of like being the owner of a car, you have car insurance. But I don't know, and I also don't know what the liability would be of the township if there was some sort of catastrophic accident during this event. So I would like to suggest that we ask our attorney for the township what he thinks of that whole issue. I'd be much more comfortable approving something if I knew that we were on solid footing for not being responsible for some horrible accident.
Any other commission members have a thought on that matter?
Well, I agree with liability and who's at fault. I think as we make a decision to approve it, I'm sure I would yield to Sarah on this one in terms of who is responsible. Us giving permission to go ahead and host this event. I mean, I'm in favor of having council look at it, but I think in the past, there's only so much that liability we can carry to cover a decision we make. And we don't, I think since it's been in the past catastrophic, I don't think it's any different than honestly if one of our volunteer firemen within the township does something on the way to a fire run and has an accident or causes some type of form of injury. I think there's a reason why you carry a lot of liability insurance. And I believe that, I think to move it forward to keep things going, you can ask them. But I think probably at the end of the day, you're going to find out that we're probably in pretty good shape.
I don't know the answer to the question. My sense is that whether the event has 10 paragliders or 15 or it has 2, if there's ever a catastrophic incident between 2 paragliders or a paraglider and an airplane or something like that, that I suppose that if there's a lawsuit associated with it that could come back at the township, I mean, that could happen whether we think we've got liability protection or not. That's just going to happen. And, there'll probably be all kinds of nasty things that would occur with such an event, which would be very unfortunate. But I think that's, part of that could not just necessarily be with this event. It could be any time, the general flying, it could be just activity out there. I mean, I remember a few years ago, a plane landed out there and it was on fire and we were watching it burn. This is before the current property owners, I believe. And so I think that it, there's always something you have to consider. And it would be interesting to know from the attorney, kind of what his views are on that. But I know I personally feel that it doesn't preclude me from wanting to advance this because I don't know that we're ever going to be able to fully protect ourselves on that.
Well, there would be, as a condition, we could require that there'd be a certain amount of insurance that would indemnify the township of any liability they may have as a result of this incident or this event, having some injury occur as a result of this event, just having the assurance that, the event sponsor is going to indemnify the township from any liability. If there's no liability, then there's no cost to them. But, if there is, I certainly would like to have some coverage.
Okay, I think it's a good concept. And so let's definitely explore that. Looks like the hand raised, if I could, what's the procedure for getting input from Mr. Cook?
You're the chair.
All right, fine. So, Mr. Cook, the Township Supervisor, I think you have a comment?
And asked him township liability for accidents related to the Memorial Day events, fireworks, or paramotors. His answer is none so long as the township is not making money on it and they don't use the township building. So there's no liability as long as those two conditions are met.
Okay, so I guess we have our answer. Thank you, Mr. Cook. So, any other questions from the commission? So, if we looked towards the last page of Sarah's write-up, or I shouldn't say it was Sarah, it might have been Sarah and Jackie, I'm not sure who was involved with that, but the staff's write-up.
19 of 36 of the packet.
We have these standards, so we should walk through these here.
Correct. And you don't have to read them aloud if you just want to say standard number 1 and then any comments from the planning commission.
Okay, I think that makes sense. So, and I would just, so I'd ask the commission for number 1, do you have any questions and or comments in support or concerns about that particular standard? I'll say I think the standard is met because we've talked about it. We seem to be comfortable with the application itself and the special use being of the property itself based on the zoning of the property and what is being asked to be conducted there. Any concerns?
None.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to standard 2. The adjacent lands. I mean, we had the notice going out. Any questions or concerns there? Not hearing any. Number 3, the special use proposed must not adversely impact the environment.
So can I go back to number 2 because there was no comments? Is that you're feeling that the standard is met, that it is consistent or compatible?
Yes, I'll make that more clear. Hearing, if any of these standards you feel is not met, please fix. We be efficient here. So for number 3, the special use impact on the environment, believe the standards being met or not?
I don't think it is because of the noise impacts and the time of the noise in the surrounding environment, outside the site.
Standard not met? So if a particular standard is not met, do we have any special procedure we have to cover with that requirement?
Well, if it's not, all of these standards have to be met to be able to approve
So
the application.
we'd have to look at it and either say, we say it's not met, or we put a condition on it, on the
Right.
approval, so that we feel comfortable that it would be met.
Right.
So-
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I believe it is met. I don't think it adversely affects it based on normal flying noise, i.e. I'm going to use paramotors, I'm going to use chainsaws, I'm going to use a lot of those different things that I think can sound just as loud. And I think the fact that it isn't, airplanes will be flying, I think it's met just in generalities.
It's met in certain times. I mean, the conversation before what you said is, boy, it's the best time to fly.
Mhm.
It's also an adverse impact. It's 6 a.m. And they're not running on regular runways. They're flying wherever. And that's been the concern of the community for 2 years.
Well, I
And
respectfully
so it's an
disagree.
adverse impact from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. You don't hear chainsaws. You don't hear personal watercraft. They're not running around that time.
I've heard boats go up and down Torch Lake at 6:30, full throttle with 5-inch exhaust.
20 of them?
One is all it takes.
Okay.
And I'm 800 feet off the lake.
I've also heard some pretty loud boats, although usually I sleep through most anything at 6 a.m. But
So I think, Andy, you're gonna have to do a straw poll, so, because we've got,
Yes.
one not met, one met, and kind of go through and see.
I was also I wanted to ask Denise and Barbara your thoughts on this number 3.
Because it's only, is it 2 days, 3 days out of the year? When I think of an environmental impact, I'm a little conflicted whether I think that really doesn't meet that standard, because I would think that there would have to be some sustained impact. And because it's temporary, I think I would vote that it would meet
That it's met.
that it's
Okay.
met.
So Kevin, you're voting it's met. Denise, you're voting that it's met. Barbara, what is your view? Do you think it's met?
I think it adversely impacts the environment.
So you're going to you say it's not met.
I say it's not met.
Okay. So Barbara and Bill both, I assume, Bill, you're voting that it's not met? Is that what would be your final perspective on that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry. So I'm just summarizing here. So I think you're saying you do not think it's met.
I don't think it's met.
Okay. So, and Chairman thinks it is met. I do recognize the considerations there, but I think it's met. So there are 3 that say it and 2 that say it's not. Okay. Number 4. I think the standard's met,
I would
subject
agree.
to the conditions that were written in Sarah's proposal, assuming we're to move forward, which means that you've got the MDOT thing. There were several other things that you listed there.
Right, you'd have the campground, you've got the fire letter already, but yeah, any outside agency permits. Or approvals if they don't issue a permit.
Yes. Any other perspective on 4? If I don't hear, I'm assuming it's met from each of you. Okay, we got to go through these others here.
Item
we
D
don't.
just talks about, there could be additional
Yes.
items that the planning commission could ask for the special use. If you wanted to, you can also do it as conditions, but this kind of lays it out if there's something either related to buffering or parking, signage, streets, utilities, lighting.
But we don't necessarily have to vote on any of this. It just
No,
be
it
raised
just gives
whether
you
it
that
was come forward.
opportunity
Yeah.
if you feel the need that you need to do that. But you do have the ability to do conditions in addition to that that are tied to the use itself.
I would say it doesn't pertain to tonight's motion or decision, but I do want to underscore item D, number 1, for future, the buffer, and this goes back to the 500 versus 300 or whatever thing we might look at. Bill, that was your comment raised earlier, thinking about the buffer and the notice period associated with that. Any other comments on this last section, section
No.
D of the standards? Any further discussion about the application as a whole?
Andy, I
Yes.
understood that I think they said that there's enough available space on the airport property for parking, that people don't need to park along Bay Colony. I would like to suggest that we require them to have parking set up and advertised as not being on Bay Colony.
So we could make a condition that they put a sign to not park on Bay Colony Road, if that's basically what you're asking
Yeah.
for? That can be a condition of approval.
Question to that, which that's okay, I agree with that, Barb. My question would be signs posted and somebody still parks there. You know what I'm saying? That, I mean, we still can't control who parks where, because I know there's people, when I've been out there in the past, that drive by that just stop and they just park. And for somebody to police that,
Yeah, I don't think we would be asking them to police it because it's not their.
just maybe a sign posted.
Yeah, just say that parking adequate here, I think it'd be fine. And just because it might encourage somebody to say, you know, there should be plenty of
Right.
parking here, and just say
Sure.
avoid parking on Bay County Road if possible.
Yeah, it's good.
Because I do know that there's residents there, there's going to be people driving up and down, and they
Mhm.
might pull over just to see, oh, there's a red one or whatever, and then the next thing you know, they don't move. So I know that could likely happen, but if we could try to help contain that a little bit, it might discourage some of that. Okay, if you look to page 13 of 13, there's a recommended motion. Seemed like we had 2 more conditions, or maybe it's just one. The sign of not parking on Bay Colony.
The other one that was talked about briefly was the liability insurance and asking the township attorney about township liability.
I think we resolved that, so.
Yep.
So could I have a motion to approve as written here from one of the commission members? Subject to also adding a 5th condition of the signing not be parking on Bay Colony Road.
I would so make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
May I have a second?
I'm sorry, what was the motion?
Oh, the motion, so it's page 21 of 36,
Yeah.
or 13 of 13, how you look at it, that a recommended motion to approve as is worded here. So I'll read it. Motion to approve with conditions for special use permit 2023-01 for the Torchport Air Park for outdoor event over Memorial Day weekend as presented. And there'd be 5 conditions associated with that. The 4 that are listed, plus the 5th one of a sign not for no parking on Bay Colony Road to be posted on the event grounds.
If we're not,
The 4 conditions plus the 5th.
the 4th one there, Andy, is limiting the
Oh.
hours.
Yep.
I think that was,
So the hours, yeah, so far the hours
I
would
didn't
be
see that.
limited to what's in the application is what, the planning commission hasn't put any additional hours on it.
But that's my point. There's not hours listed in the application for all of the events. So it's a whenever to whenever.
They did have on.
So it's either strike the 4th condition or write in some hours, but
Right.
saying hours shall be limited to blank makes no sense.
Well, and that's what that was left open for you guys to
Yeah.
decide what that should be.
So it's whenever to whenever.
And so there were like the pancake breakfast has hours. We got hours for the cornhole tonight, fireworks. This flyer talks about tandem flights from at sunrise and 2 hours before sunset on Saturday and Sunday.
So in theory, the events run from basically sunrise. Could be the paramotors around then. Events associated listed on this flyer here. And then it could be as late in the night of the fireworks, which is past sunset, to sometime after 10 p.m.
Right. And the fireworks we can't regulate anyways, but then you also have camping that's,
Going
24/7.
Barbara?
Can we just say hours limited as stated in the application?
Yeah.
Because then it covers all of those things.
I like that. That makes good sense.
So then if we add the parking along Bay Colony sign, then we have 5 conditions.
We have 5 total.
Okay.
So Barbara, with that, could I have a motion to approve special use permit subject to the 5 conditions now laid out on this page?
So Kevin made the motion. We're looking for a second.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. So do we have a second? Actually, I think we need to restate it because it was changed since you did.
Adding the 5th condition.
Okay.
Motion approved, adding 5 conditions listed. And hours of operation for the application.
May I have a second?
I second it.
Let's do a roll call vote on this. Barbara?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
No? Kevin?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So the special use permit is approved 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1.
Okay. Do you want to go get Laura?
So move on to zoning ordinance amendments update.
I'm just
So-
going to wait for Laura to come in real
Oh,
quick.
sorry.
Is that
That's a
yeah.
good point. Welcome back. So Laura, we are now up to the agenda item associated with zoning ordinance update. And so I think where we left last meeting, we did approve a new sign ordinance and recommended for approval by the board because it now goes to the township board. And now we're kind of in this section now where we want to start moving through additional ordinances. So I guess, Sarah, you've been doing some work in preparation for that. Can you give kind of an overview of where we are with that and where the commission should be focused next?
Yeah, so at last month's meeting, we kind of talked about trying to move things through a little bit faster instead of doing kind of these little pieces, because you remember at last month's meeting, we made a motion to have a public hearing on the variance criteria and the criteria for rezoning. So then we kind of discussed, why don't we have some special meetings coming up and maybe work on the ordinance in bigger chunks. So I just had a memo in here to kind of say, okay, let's do this. Let's work in June and kind of look at the first 3 or 4 chapters of the ordinance. It is quite tedious work because a lot of the sections tie back into other sections of the zoning ordinance when you're doing that. I think I've mentioned that before, even as simple as in chapter 2, when we're talking about there's home occupations, home-based businesses, and cottage industry. Those are some uses that are in that. And so we need to go and change the definitions related to those uses. So while I'm saying we're working on chapter 2 or article 2, I'm also working on article definitions through the process. So kind of working through that. So, I would recommend that we try to pick out some times in June to start the review. This is a similar process to what we would have done with the draft ordinance, kind of working through articles, bit by bit in that. So looking to get through that to kind of move this along, because, we all keep talking about the master plan, and so we need to get through some of the zoning ordinance work to get to the master plan here this year still.
So question, what would be the top subject or top ordinance that you would, or top 2 maybe, that you would want us to focus on next?
Well, I think chapter 2 makes sense. We always keep going back to chapter 2, honestly. I mean, I've been working with the township for 2 years, and that planning commission at the time was talking about chapter 2, and we're walking through the sections on that. And that's kind of when I was like, well, maybe we should go and do a rewrite or an update of it, because it just becomes so tedious to work through the chapters as they're currently laid out. But I think chapter 2, because that touches so many properties, that's the general provisions that applies typically to all properties in the township. I also am looking at chapter 3. We already did a chunk of that with signs, but there are some other regulations in there that should be updated to reflect better either law or regulations that we've gone through. And then I threw in there on this page anyways, 14 and 15, those are kind of our site plan review special use, because they're more, I call them administrative, but I mean, they're dealt with the planning commission, but hopefully it won't take too much time for you to get through those sections, because the policy's, the same, just cleaning it up and making it kind of more smooth for you. We could also throw on there, we're having the public hearings on those regulations I mentioned already. But those are in your ZBA chapters and your amendment chapters, which are kind of the same way. They should be fairly brief, and we could get those updated fairly quickly with those additional standards. Maybe smooth out some of the language that are in those chapters so it flows better and makes a little bit more sense. So we could work on that because we've already kind of started it.
So I went to a training session today with Steve Langworthy, hosted something over at Gaylord, and Kevin was there and Jackie was there as well. And it was interesting, one of the things and there was probably 50 different members across different planning commissions or ZBAs, for the most part from Northern Michigan. One of the things he talked about, well, I'll back up and say it was very helpful, because he walked through kind of generically everything that's contained in the zoning ordinance and kind of the order of things and how it all ties together. And the one thing he mentioned to me was what you had just said, or, he talked about how it's very difficult to focus on one ordinance unless it happens to be really self-contained. We're very fortunate that the signs one was relatively self-contained. The other ones tend to sprinkle out into a bunch of things, because you got definitions which tend to cover across a bunch of ordinances. So as soon as you start to change one, by definition, you're going into the definitions. And so it helped kind of reinforce the complexity of going through a rewrite and trying to address this. I've also, my wife has expressed to me, because she's on the ZBA, and she's talked about some of the challenges with certain aspects of ordinances as they are now, and the challenges that the ZBA is having addressing issues at times of lack of clarity and things that need to be looked at. So I guess what I would suggest, and I would like to understand how the commission views, is that Sarah's listing chapters 2 and 3 here, that maybe what we could do is, there's a 1 in front. The 1 is just the purpose and the scope, right? The 1's really simple. So 1, 2, and 3. We started with those first 3, and then you talk. Which one is the one that pertains to the ZBA?
Yeah, 20, chapter 20.
Maybe wouldn't that would be fairly high on the list too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they all are high on the list. So when you're asking me which ones to pick,
Well, I was going to suggest 1, 2, and 3 to start, because they're the first in the order. But then we go from there and see how that plays in. And I think as a group, I would like to see how that, kind of start going through the rewrite of it and compare to the existing ordinance and see how that shakes forward. That's what I'd recommend that we do. And just plow right into it and start going with it.
Yeah. The only thing with Article 3 is that what's going to happen is I'm going to take a bunch of stuff out of Article 3 and put it in a different article. So Article 3 might get kind of short because it has uses, and what I want to do is put the uses, regulations for the uses all in the same section of the ordinance. Instead of, we have wireless communication towers here. I think there was a kennel, there's wind energy. It's kind of in this random spot in Article 3, but then there's regulations for other uses in the articles themselves. And then you find where certain spots conflict with each other. So we have to deal with some of Article 3 when we get into the zones a little bit better.
But Sarah, your recommendation would be that we forget what we say for the moment. Your recommendation would be to go and take the proposed rewrite and start plowing through it that way, correct? Is that what would that be more efficient?
Of the draft that we have?
Yeah, the draft rewrite, yes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because it's already done. I mean, I'm going to spend time writing your current ordinance to look like what the draft looks like, trying to get to that. But dealing with the language that's listed in here and kind of dealing with it in piecemeal, I think there's a bigger risk for having errors because you're dealing with it in piecemeal. You're not looking at it all at the same time and trying to make it all work together.
Yeah, and I would say that I've gotten much more comfortable kind of diving into the proposed rewrite from the time we first started looking at it because of several things. One is I liked the way the sign one was laid out. It made it pretty straightforward. I've looked at other aspects of the draft and I think it reads better. I felt that from day one. What I didn't feel comfortable with day one was kind of feeling kind of that leaping off into just a full blossomed rewrite of everything all at once. Seemed uncomfortable. And then frankly, as I've mentioned before, the comments that in the conversations I've had with Steve Langworthy around, his views of it, he's looked at the draft rewrite, the proposed draft rewrite. He's provided input to those already, and Sarah's incorporated those into it. So his views were similar. And, hearing from him as an expert, Sarah, I view as an expert and has an expert of a whole consulting firm behind her, that seems like a good process for us to start walking through. And if we get into that and we start feeling uncomfortable, we can always back out. But I think I'm getting much more comfortable with that.
I'd go with that. I'd personally like some context. If you've taken some sections out of 2 or 3 and moved them somewhere else before we start editing to get that kind of context you got from Langworthy. Otherwise, I'll feel a little bit blind going through parts of it compared to what the current ordinance is. So when we meet to go through it, a 10-minute, here's what we took out and moved to a different place. You said it briefly, it made more sense to combine them. I get that, but I'd like to hear a little bit more. I think it'd help in my review and edit.
So as long as I'm on this side, Laura, I already think I know what your perspective is, but what do you feel?
I think that we all feel like what you're saying. You're kind of thinking of like a red line, right? And I've asked for that probably half a dozen times too, but I've come to understand how difficult that would be with all the change. It would be almost impossible and not worth. It wouldn't make any sense probably to try to read that. So personally, I think if you point out some of the things like, hey, this is a really important thing or a controversial topic or something, or this is very different in this proposed, or these are the things to consider. If you call it those things, that would probably be the most helpful.
Denise, what's your perspective on it?
I'm comfortable taking the revised. I mean, we have the original, but I think that's a good place to be at, and we can go back and forth, but I'm comfortable with using it.
Okay. Barbara?
it's frustrating because we keep changing what we're gonna do. I thought we had agreed we were gonna do the master plan before we rewrote the zoning ordinance. And now we're back to, let's rewrite the zoning ordinance and start with the draft that Sarah already presented to us, that we said, no, we don't like that because it didn't give us enough an idea of what was being changed. So I'm just frustrated with the whole thing. So just figure out how we're gonna go about doing this, let me know, and we'll go from there.
And that's fair. I can understand how you would feel that way because we have wavered a bit. And I would also say early on, I felt less comfortable about the rewrite, but I've become more comfortable, and that's why I'm reaching out to each of you to get your perspectives on it. So, Kevin, what is your view?
I would concur with what your thoughts were, Andy. When we started this process, I was a little out. I needed those changes to be seen, to understand. Talking more with Sarah, the steering committee did a great job to do all these things. I'm very comfortable now to go into it with the group, sounds like we're going to do.
Yeah. And I want to underscore, proceeding down this path, that the context is very important. As Bill summarized it really well, to have that and make sure that we're all comfortable with any particular point that we, not, because we're leaving something behind and going to in a brand new kind of direction. But I think that's super important. So actually, I'd like to, is this something that we need a vote on, or we could just move ahead with this, can't we? Or?
No, I think we can move ahead with it. And that's what I mean. As we review each chapter, I'm, going to walk through it and talk about things that have been changed or updated, or where you can find this. If the policy's changed on it, and we will walk through kind of the chapters. I'm not going to spend too much time, belaboring a point, but kind of go, here's some of the big items. What did you see? What do you have concerns about? What questions can I answer from you? And so it will be important once we start going through these sections that you have read through it and made notes on it to make sure that we move forward in it and that we can have good discussions about it. We can come back eventually. You'll see kind of a complete document altogether. But I think it is important to come prepared to any of those meetings for the discussion, just like your regular planning commission meeting. But I know it can be a little overwhelming when you have a whole big book. So I would kind of just lay out, these are the articles we're going to talk about. And then I can give you a little bit of context, written context in your packet. And then at the meeting, give you more details if you're comfortable with that. So I don't think you need a motion to do that unless you want a motion to make sure you stick with it and continue forward. But you could always make a motion to change that. So
That's right. And we could dive into it and decide we don't like it.
Absolutely.
That's a possibility. So
Absolutely.
there's no perfect path here.
Right. Yeah. And what I've learned of being a planner is that you have to adapt on a frequent basis, and nothing goes as planned. So we will do that. So I still think, though, that it would be great to nail down a couple of dates for us to start our review on that. Right now, for the June meeting, we have those 2 public hearings scheduled on those 2 sections, so we can continue to move forward with those unless you want to hold those for the whole draft. But we have those. So I think at the June meeting, we'll have a good opportunity to talk about a couple of articles at that meeting. So then if there's any additional June meetings here that kind of work for you, our regular June meeting is, I want to say the 10th, but let me double check that. 13th? Okay.
I've gone through and made some notes on the dates you had in the letter from when available. When we met last month, we talked about having a schedule to get to the completion for both the communities, so they know when public meetings are and when we're going to be talking about certain sections, and for us to try and schedule it. I still think that would really benefit us to have a path to make it less frustrating. Which sections are we going to review when are the public meetings going to be, so that people want to come for certain sections can come, as opposed to coming saying, maybe they're going to talk about section 7 tonight, maybe they're not, but I better show up. I think a schedule to complete this is going to be key to actually complete it, and to help the community be aware of what we're changing and when.
No, I like that. And I also think that we could, if we're laying out that schedule, I mean, Sarah, we've been trying to take the kind of approach of getting as many commission members as we can, and we should still do that. However, I think if we laid out a series of maybe, we've got, 7 regular meetings through the rest of the year. And we've got whatever many special meetings we might put into there. And I would think we should, between now and say, October, we should probably get 3 or 4 more special meetings, lay the whole thing out and just say, here's kind of a path. And then we'll try to be there as many as we can. But if somebody's missing, they're missing and they'll catch up. And then we won't try to, obviously we need a quorum. Well, do we need
Yeah.
we need a quorum period to have the meeting.
Right.
So, but if as long as there's a quorum, they can continue to advance the ball, so to speak.
Well, do you want me to look at the schedule then, and we can pick out maybe a additional day a month for the summer to work through that? I mean, the summer gets a little hairy with things that are happening.
You've got 4 June dates here. Let's book
Right.
them all.
So, yeah, and I don't know why I didn't put June 10th down. We don't have a meeting here, right? That's a Monday.
Saturday.
Oh, I'm in July. Meh. That's why. Never mind. So I know, Andy, you had mentioned Mondays. I've got June 19th, June 26th on there. Those are 2 in a row, though. I don't know if we'd be able to get you for 2 Mondays in a row.
There's a good shot at it. I think we could do it.
Yeah.
I'll just fly out Tuesday morning.
June
June
19th
and
and
26th.
26th.
Bill, does that work? Are those dates?
15th, 26th, 28th work. 19th does not for
Does
me.
not work.
19th does not work for me either.
Okay.
Let's go with the 15th, 26th, and 28th. Laura, what is your perspective on those 3?
All good.
Denise?
15th, what was the other one?
26th and
28th.
28th.
Yes, those are all.
Kevin? My schedule, I will try to make it work. My travel doesn't map out that far in advance, unfortunately.
Well, what we
But
can
we'll
do
just
is we'll
do the
put it on
best
our
we can.
calendar, and then when we get closer to it, we can just confirm that we have a quorum
Yep.
and what we're talking about. And you can always, anybody that's not here can always provide comments in writing for consideration. So we'll map out those 3 days, and like I said, as we get closer. So we handed out the draft zoning ordinance that was available to you. We can make you another copy if you've misplaced it. I can send it out electronically again to, if you need a copy of it, get a hold of Jackie. She can make sure to have a copy put in the box for you. And
Was that
then
still on SharePoint somewhere?
probably, I'll send out the electronic one so that you can make comments in there. And then I will, give me maybe the rest of the week or the beginning of next week to kind of lay out a game plan for the review of the chapters for you to focus on. I'd encourage you to kind of read through it and get familiar with it and what's included in it. But, we'll try to lay out some of the chapters that make sense to group together and have those discussions.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a scope and a schedule is what we're looking for. The sections we'll edit, the sections we won't, the dates we're going to do the editing, the dates we'll have public meetings so we can
Yeah.
make sure folks in the community are aware. Scope and schedule would help us a lot, I think.
Will we be starting, is it possible we'll be starting? Because we had something that we reviewed that we were going to go over. Are we going to start with that again? I'll have to go
Well,
back and look at
Well, from a prior meeting or today?
Yeah, from a prior meeting, we were going to start with.
Well,
some
I think-
article.
Yeah, but I think Sarah came back with these recommendations tonight, which was 2, 3, and I lost the page here.
Yeah, 14 and 15. That's in the current ordinance. That doesn't align with the draft chapters. That's based on the current.
Okay.
So the draft would be, I'll have to figure out what those align with. 2 is still the same. 3 it exists in multiple articles. 14 and 15 are chapters in in the draft as well. I think it's 7 and 8. 8 or 9.
Okay, I'll just wait to see,
So,
and then I'll
yeah.
try not to reread.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So since, like I said, the June meeting that we do have those 2 public hearings, but I don't have any other applications. So I'm going to throw that on as the start of when we will start reviewing some of the articles in that draft document.
So Sarah, you're going to lay out a schedule. You're going to lay out the kind of scope of what's going to be covered and not covered, so to speak, and maybe a brief summary of things. And then we'll talk about it in those particular meetings and we'll start banging through it. And then
7?
we'll go ahead.
7 p.m. or 6?
Oh, for those special meetings?
Mhm.
It'd be nice to start at 6, but I don't know if that, I mean, there's a lot of meetings altogether right there. So I don't know if that's feasible for you to make 6 o'clock.
If I can make 7, I can probably make 6. So what do other people feel on the special meetings? 6 or 7?
I could do it either way. Either way.
Either for me.
6? All right, 6 o'clock. We'll make them 6.
6 p.m.
Because if I'm in town, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
So 6 is fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Plus, we'll be fresher.
Right. Okay.
So those are 6. So everybody remember that the special ones are 6, the regular ones are 7. That will be a little confusing.
And I'll send out a follow-up email. These are the meetings because Jason's not here. Then you can put it in your calendars when you're sitting at your computer and all of that good stuff. So,
Okay, thank you for
yeah, thank
that
you.
section.
That took a turn.
Well, guess it did. Maybe it was the Steve Langworthy today. I'm not sure, but so what do we have left to cover today? We've got ongoing reports.
Yep, we have the permit reports on your desk. This last month, we had a couple of interesting items. So one of the violations was for Volkers on here. We did have a formal hearing at Circuit Court, and the judge upheld the tickets and ordered enforcement, the enforcement remedies for that. And then the Zoning Board of Appeals did a decision that had to do with the helicopter pad and using a helicopter for transportation. And there was a hearing yesterday, and the judge upheld the ZBA's decision that you can't have your helicopter pad in the setback, and a helicopter is not a incidental, customarily accessory use to a home in Torch Lake Township. So.
Did you say either one of those is being appealed or not?
So
Do we not know?
far,
No.
no, but there's still time for both of them.
Yeah. PC represented the ZBA?
Nothing to report. We did not have a meeting.
Okay. And then the board representative is not here. That's Jason. Okay, so now we can open up to public comment. If anybody from the public would like to come forward and make any comments about any other topic other than what we talked about with the special use permit, please come forward. Don't see anyone. Any concerns of the commission? I'll start. I'll just reemphasize, I do realize we made a pivot bit today, but it's been kind of something I've been thinking about for a while, and I've been, getting more comfortable with it, as I said. So I'm anxious to just dive into this and get going. Any concerns of the members? Sarah?
Nothing additional.
Okay, with that, I think it's time to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye.